welcome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Or, I might show up at your door. I'm just here to share some creepy stories, so sit back and enjoy. Disclaimer: the content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. The first thing I noticed wasn't the alarms. It was the silence. I'd been monitoring Sector 7's satellite array for 3 years, and the communication hub never went quiet. Even during maintenance windows, there was always something. The steady ping of status updates, the soft chatter of telemetry data streaming from 247 active satellites orbiting overhead. The sound was so constant I'd learned to sleep with it like digital white noise. But at 14:32 Mountain Time, the screens went dark and the speakers fell silent. Not all at once. That might have been easier to explain. Solar flare, equipment failure, something straightforward. Instead, they died in sequence like dominoes falling across the Pacific. First, the weather satellites over Hawaii, their signals cutting out with sharp electronic squeals. Then the GPS constellation, 24 birds going dark in perfect synchronization. Finally, the military surveillance satellites, their encrypted feeds dissolving into static before vanishing entirely. Each connection severed cleanly, no error messages, no degraded signals. Just gone. Aiden, you seeing this? Martinez called from the adjacent workstation, his voice tight with the kind of controlled panic that comes from 12 years of Air Force training. I've got nothing on the European array. The metallic taste of adrenaline flooded my mouth as I pulled up the diagnostic protocols, my fingers trembling slightly as they moved across the keyboard. The central display showed a map of the world dotted with green lights, each one representing an active satellite. As I watched, another cluster over the North Atlantic blinked out, leaving dark patches across the ocean like spreading ink stains. How many? I asked, though I was already counting, my engineering mind automatically calculating orbital patterns and coverage gaps. 62 down in the last 90 seconds, Martinez said, his voice cracking slightly. And it's accelerating. The silence that followed was broken by the low whine of cooling fans working overtime and the distant sound of boots on metal grating. Someone was running in the corridor outside, actually running, not the measured pace of routine movement. NORAD's Cheyenne Mountain Complex didn't do panic. It did controlled responses and measured reactions. People running meant something was catastrophically wrong. I pulled up the satellite health monitoring system, my hands now steady with purpose. The failures weren't random, they were following communication relay paths, jumping from satellite to satellite like some kind of digital plague. But that was impossible. Satellites didn't share executable code like that, didn't have the interconnected architecture that would allow for cascading failures. Unless someone had built that architecture in secret. Martinez, bring up the threat assessment board, I said, my voice cutting through the electronic hum of dying systems. I need to see what DEFCON we're at. The main display shifted to show the current threat level, DEFCON 3, elevated but not critical. The readout pulsed with a soft amber glow that now seemed almost mocking. If we were losing satellite coverage this fast, we should have been at DEFCON 2 minimum. Either the assessment board wasn't getting accurate information, or someone was deliberately keeping us in the dark. Aiden, the voice came from behind me, soft and familiar. I spun around to see Bella standing in the doorway, her security badge swaying slightly as she caught her breath. My sister looked pale, her usually perfectly styled blonde hair disheveled like she'd been running her hands through it. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she'd been awake for far too long. "Bella? What are you doing down here?" The comm center was restricted access, and while Bella had clearance as an IT security specialist, she normally worked 3 levels up in the cybersecurity division. Her presence here meant either a direct order or something serious enough to make her abandon protocol. "I was tracking anomalous network traffic when everything went dark," she said, moving to the spare workstation beside me. "The patterns I was seeing, Aiden, someone's been planning this for months, maybe years." She pulled up a series of data logs on her screen, and I felt my stomach drop as the patterns became clear. The logs showed careful, methodical infiltration of satellite control systems, not the brute force attack I'd been imagining, but surgical precision. Someone had been placing digital time bombs in our infrastructure, waiting for the right moment to trigger them all at once. The timestamps went back 18 months. "How many satellites total?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "At last count, 197, Bella said quietly, her fingers still flying across the keyboard. "We've lost nearly 75% of our global coverage." The implications hit me like a physical blow. No satellite coverage meant no GPS navigation for civilian aircraft, no weather monitoring for storm tracking, no early warning systems for missile launches. If someone wanted to move military assets without detection or launch an attack without advance warning, this would be the perfect cover. We were flying blind in a world that had grown dependent on eyes in the sky. "We need to get this to command," I said, standing so quickly my chair rolled backward into the wall with a metallic clang. "If this is a prelude to something bigger." The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing the comm center in blood-red illumination that made everything look like a scene from hell. But more importantly, the backup power systems engaged with a sound I'd never heard before. A deep, resonant hum that seemed to come from the mountain itself, vibrating through the reinforced concrete and steel. In 3 years of working in this facility, through countless drills and system tests, I'd never experienced a primary power failure. "That's not good," Martinez said, his voice barely above a whisper. I was already moving toward the communication panel when Bella grabbed my arm, her fingers cold and trembling. "Aiden, wait. Look at this." On her screen, barely visible in the red emergency lighting, was a single line of text that made my blood run cold. The letters seemed to glow against the dark background, as if they were burned into the display. "Ghost Protocol initiated nuclear strike untracked." What the hell does that mean? I asked, though part of me already knew. The phrase had the clinical precision of military terminology, the kind of code name that made bureaucrats feel better about discussing mass destruction. "It means someone just blinded us completely," Bella said, her voice hollow with the weight of understanding. "No satellites, no early warning, no way to track incoming missiles. If someone wanted to launch a nuclear strike right now, we'd never see it coming until the warheads were already falling." The emergency klaxons started wailing then, the sound echoing through the corridors of Cheyenne Mountain like the cry of some enormous metal beast. The piercing alarm cut through the electrical hum and made conversation impossible for several seconds. Through the reinforced windows of the comm center, I could see personnel running in the hallways. Not the controlled movement of a drill, but the chaotic urgency of a real emergency. Officers were shouting orders, their voices muffled by the thick glass, but their panic unmistakable. I thought about Mom and Dad in Denver, 90 miles away. I thought about the millions of people going about their daily lives, completely unaware that the protective dome of satellites that had watched over them for decades was now nothing more than expensive space debris. "We need to find a way to restore communications," I said, forcing myself to focus on the immediate problem. "Can you trace the source of the attack?" Bella's fingers flew across her keyboard, but the screen kept flickering. "I can try, but without the satellite network, I'm working blind. It's like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing." "Then we find the pieces," I said, grabbing my security badge and heading for the door. "Command needs to know what we're dealing with." But as I reached for the door handle, it occurred to me that maybe Command already knew. Maybe that's why the lights had gone out. Maybe that's why people were running in the corridors. Maybe we were already under attack, and the falling satellites were just the opening move. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it made me angry. Someone had spent years infiltrating our systems, planning this moment, preparing to blind us before striking. They'd counted on fear and chaos to paralyze us, to make us helpless in the face of an attack we couldn't see coming. They'd made a mistake. I looked back at Bella, who was still working frantically at her terminal despite the failing power, her face illuminated by the ghostly glow of the emergency screen. "Can you maintain access to the internal network?" "For now," she said, her fingers never stopping their rapid dance across the keyboard. "But if they hit the hardwired systems next?" "They won't," I said with more confidence than I felt. "They need us to stay dark, but they also need the base infrastructure intact. Otherwise, they're just creating chaos without purpose." "And if you're wrong?" I thought about that for a moment, listening to the klaxon wail and the sound of running footsteps in the corridor. The emergency lighting flickered, casting moving shadows that made our workspace feel like the inside of a dying animal. Then we improvise. The lights flickered again, and for a moment, we were plunged into complete darkness. In that brief second of absolute black, I made my choice. The silence was deafening, no electronic hum, no cooling fans, no digital chatter. Just the sound of our breathing and the distant echo of the klaxon. When the lights came back on, I was already moving toward the door, Bella right behind me. We had work to do, and whoever had done this was about to learn that they'd picked the wrong people to mess with. The klaxon died abruptly as we stepped into the corridor, leaving behind a silence that felt like a physical weight pressing against my eardrums. Emergency lighting cast everything in crimson shadows, transforming familiar hallways into arteries of some massive dying organism. The absence of the constant electronic hum I'd grown accustomed to made every footstep echo like gunshots against the reinforced concrete walls, each sound bouncing off the curved ceiling designed to withstand nuclear detonation. "Aiden, Bella," Colonel Cole's voice cut through the eerie quiet like a blade. He was striding toward us with the measured pace of someone who'd spent 25 years turning chaos into order, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw was set. Cole commanded our sector with the kind of quiet authority that made people feel safe even when the world was ending. If he was worried, we were in serious trouble. "Sir," I said, falling into step beside him as we moved deeper into the facility. "What's our status?" "Catastrophic," Cole said without breaking stride. "We've lost contact with NORAD Command, Peterson Air Force Base, and pretty much every other installation that depends on satellite communication. The landlines are overloaded, and what cellular towers are still functioning can't handle the traffic. We reached the blast door that separated the communication center from the rest of the facility, a massive steel barrier designed to withstand nuclear attack. Cole placed his hand on the biometric scanner, and after a moment that felt like an eternity, the door began to grind open with a sound like grinding teeth. "The good news," Cole continued as we passed through the doorway, "is that our hardened systems are still functional. The bad news is that without satellite coverage, we're essentially deaf and blind to anything happening beyond our immediate vicinity." The corridor beyond the blast door was a flurry of activity. Personnel moved with the controlled urgency of a facility switching to emergency protocols. I caught glimpses of technicians working at portable communication equipment, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of backup displays. Someone had set up a manual switchboard, actual physical cables and connections, something I hadn't seen outside of museums. "Sir," Bella said, her voice carrying the kind of professional calm that meant she was fighting panic, "I've been analyzing the attack patterns. This wasn't random system failure. Someone spent months, possibly years, infiltrating our satellite control systems. They placed dormant code throughout the network, waiting for the right moment to activate it." Cole stopped so abruptly that I nearly collided with him. "You're certain?" "Absolutely," Bella said, pulling out her tablet to show him the data she'd been compiling. "The timestamps on the infiltration go back 18 months. The attack was surgical. They knew exactly which satellites to target first to create maximum disruption with minimal effort." "Show me," Cole said, leading us into a secondary briefing room that had been converted into a makeshift command center. The walls were lined with monitors showing what little information we could still gather: weather radar from ground stations, seismic data from hardened sensors, and communication attempts from other facilities. It was a pathetic fraction of what we normally had access to. Bella connected her tablet to the central display, and the room filled with the soft blue glow of data streams and network topology charts. "Here," she said, pointing to a series of connection points highlighted in red. "They started with the GPS constellation, but not randomly. They hit the satellites that provide coverage for the major military installations first, then expanded outward." I studied the pattern, my engineering mind automatically filling in the gaps. "They're not just trying to blind us," I said slowly. "They're creating corridors. Look at the remaining coverage. There are specific flight paths that still have partial satellite visibility." "Flight paths for what?" Cole asked, but I could see in his eyes that he already knew. "Missiles," I said, the word tasting like metal in my mouth. "They've created blind spots in our early warning system while maintaining just enough coverage to guide their own assets." The implications settled over the room like a physical weight. Someone had spent years preparing for this moment, infiltrating our most secure systems, learning our capabilities and weaknesses. They'd planned this attack with the precision of a surgical strike, and we'd walked right into it. "How long until they can restore the network?" Cole asked. Bella shook her head grimly. "The attack wasn't just about bringing the satellites down. They've corrupted the control systems, the ground stations, even the backup protocols. It's like they knew our contingency plans better than we did." "That's impossible," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't true. The attack had been too precise, too perfectly timed. Someone with intimate knowledge of our systems had been planning this for a long time. "Sir," a technician called from across the room, his voice tight with urgency. "We're getting reports from ground stations. Aircraft are beginning to report navigation failures. Commercial flights are declaring emergencies." Cole moved to the communication station, where a young airman was frantically working multiple radio frequencies. Static filled the room like the sound of electronic insects, punctuated by fragments of panicked transmissions crackling through speakers that seemed to strain against the interference. "GPS failure. Requesting immediate vector to nearest. Navigation systems completely dead. We are flying blind. Mayday, mayday. United 447. We have lost all." The voices cut off abruptly, leaving only the white noise of empty frequencies and the soft electronic whine of overloaded circuits. "How many aircraft?" Cole asked. "Thousands," the airman replied, his face pale in the emergency lighting. "Every plane in the air just lost GPS navigation. They're flying blind." I felt the room spin slightly as the full scope of the disaster hit me like a physical blow. Commercial aviation, military operations, shipping, emergency services, everything that relied on satellite navigation was now operating without guidance. The chaos wouldn't be limited to military installations. Cities would be paralyzed, emergency services crippled, and that was just the beginning. I thought about the thousands of aircraft currently airborne, their pilots suddenly thrust back into the age of dead reckoning and paper charts. I thought about the cargo ships navigating narrow channels, the ambulances trying to reach hospitals, the fire departments responding to emergencies. "Sir," Bella said quietly, "there's something else. The attack wasn't just about the satellites. They've also been probing our ground-based radar systems. Nothing destructive yet, but they're mapping our capabilities." "For what purpose?" Cole asked, though I could see he was already thinking 3 steps ahead. "If I wanted to launch a nuclear strike without being detected," I said, the words coming out in a rush as the pieces clicked together, "I'd need to know exactly where the blind spots are. Not just in satellite coverage, but in radar coverage too." The room fell silent except for the distant hum of ventilation systems working overtime to maintain air circulation deep within the mountain, and the occasional crackle of radio static that sounded like electronic gunfire. Cole stood motionless for a long moment, his face a mask of controlled calculation, the kind of expression that came from years of training to remain calm while the world burned around him. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but carried the weight of terrible certainty, each word measured and precise. "We need to assume we're about to be attacked," he said. "Not just the satellite network, but the United States. This was a preparatory strike." "Orders, sir?" the technician asked. Cole looked at the wall display showing the gaps in our satellite coverage, the dark patches where our eyes in the sky had been surgically removed. "We go to DEFCON 2. Alert all remaining installations through hardline communications. If we can't see an attack coming, we need to be ready for anything." As personnel began implementing the alert protocols, I found myself staring at the display showing our remaining satellite coverage. The pattern was too deliberate, too perfect. Whoever had done this understood our systems better than we did, had planned for contingencies we hadn't even considered. "Bella," I said quietly, "can you trace the source of the attack?" She was already working, her fingers flying across her tablet. "I'm trying, but they were thorough. Every trace I follow leads to a dead end or a compromised system. It's like they anticipated every method we might use to track them." "There has to be something," I insisted. "Nobody's perfect. They had to leave a trail somewhere." "Maybe," Bella said, but her voice carried doubt. But Aiden, what if they wanted to be traced? What if leading us down these paths is part of their plan? The thought made my blood run cold. If the attackers were anticipating our response, if they'd planned for our countermeasures, then we were walking into a trap. But what choice did we have? We couldn't just sit in the dark, waiting for whatever came next. "Sir," the communications technician called out, his voice cracking with stress. "We're getting reports from ground radar stations. They're detecting something, but without satellite confirmation, they can't verify what they're seeing." Cole moved to the communication station, and I followed, my heart pounding as I anticipated what we might hear. The radio crackled with static. Then a voice cut through the interference. "Cheyenne Mountain, this is Pause Beal. We're tracking multiple contacts, bearing northeast, altitude unknown. We can't get a clear read without satellite confirmation. Request immediate verification." Cole grabbed the microphone, his voice steady despite the chaos around us. Pause Beal, this is Cheyenne Mountain Actual. We have no satellite capability. Can you confirm track characteristics? Static filled the room for several seconds. Then, Cheyenne Mountain, tracks appear consistent with ballistic trajectory. We're showing multiple contacts, but without satellite data, we can't verify launch point or intended target. The room fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Multiple contacts on ballistic trajectories. Without satellite confirmation, we couldn't be sure, but the implication was clear. Someone had launched missiles and we were flying blind. "How long until impact?" Cole asked, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Unknown without satellite tracking," came the reply. "Could be minutes, could be hours. We just don't know." I looked at Bella, who was staring at her tablet with an expression of growing horror. "What is it?" I asked. "The network infiltration," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been analyzing the attack patterns, and there's something I missed. The satellites weren't just taken offline, they were reprogrammed first. Someone's been using our own satellite network to coordinate this attack." The implications hit me like a physical blow. Our own defensive systems had been turned against us, used to blind us to an attack that was already underway. We weren't just dealing with an external enemy. We were dealing with an enemy that had been inside our systems for months, possibly years. "Cole," I said, my voice tight with urgency, "we need to get to the backup control center. If they've compromised the primary systems, maybe the hardened backups are still clean." Cole nodded grimly. "Do it. Take whatever personnel you need. If there's even a chance we can restore some capability, we have to try." As I started toward the door, Bella grabbed my arm. "Aiden, wait. What if this is what they want? What if they're herding us toward the backup systems?" I looked at her, seeing my own fear reflected in her eyes. The truth was, we had no good options. We could stay here and wait for whatever was coming, or we could try to restore our capabilities and risk walking into another trap. But doing nothing meant accepting defeat, and that wasn't an option. "Then we're careful," I said. "But we can't just sit here blind." The sound of boots on metal grating echoed through the corridor as we began moving toward the backup control center, deeper into the mountain where the most hardened systems were located. Behind us, the radio continued to crackle with reports of unidentified contacts and failed communications. We were walking into the dark, with no way of knowing what waited for us there. But we were walking, and that was something. In a world where the sky had gone dark and the future was unwritten, movement was the only form of hope we had left. The mountain around us seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, as if the very stone was aware of the danger approaching from above. And somewhere in the depths of those reinforced corridors, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were already too late. The backup control center lay 3 levels deeper in the mountain, accessible only through a maze of corridors that felt like descending into the belly of some massive concrete beast. Our footsteps echoed with metallic precision off the curved walls as we descended, the emergency lighting casting our shadows in jagged shapes that seemed to claw at the walls ahead of us. The air grew thicker with each level, heavy with the metallic taste of recycled atmosphere and the sharp ozone smell of electrical systems pushed far beyond their design limits. The hardened systems should be completely isolated, I said, more to convince myself than inform Bella as we approached the final blast door. Air-gapped, physically separated from any network that could have been compromised. Cole's biometric scan took longer than usual, the system cycling through multiple verification protocols before the massive door began its grinding rotation. The sound of metal on metal filled the narrow corridor like the growl of some enormous machine awakening from hibernation. When the door finally opened, we were greeted by a rush of cool air that carried the familiar scent of ozone and the sharp metallic smell of overheated circuits. The backup control center was a mirror image of the main facility, but older, more brutal in its efficiency. Banks of monitors lined the walls, displaying scrolling data streams in amber phosphorescent text that reminded me of the early days of computing, when reliability mattered more than aesthetics. The floor was raised, with cables and cooling ducts visible beneath the perforated metal grating. 3 technicians were already at work, their faces washed in the ghostly glow of their screens. "Status report," Cole called out as we entered. Sergeant Travis, the senior technician, looked up from his workstation with an expression of grim satisfaction. "Sir, we've got limited satellite communication restored. The hardened military satellites are still operational, but their coverage is sporadic. We're working on establishing contact with other installations." I moved to the central display, where a tactical map showed the remaining satellite coverage in patches of sickly green against a field of ominous black. It was like looking at a diseased organism, with islands of capability surrounded by vast areas of digital necrosis that pulsed with the rhythm of failing systems. "What about the radar contacts?" I asked. "Are we getting any confirmation?" "That's the problem," Travis said, his fingers dancing across his keyboard. "We're getting conflicting data. Some ground stations are reporting clear skies, others are showing multiple contacts. Without satellite correlation, we can't tell which reports are accurate." Bella was already plugging her tablet into the backup systems, her face tight with concentration. "I need to run a comparison between the main network logs and the backup systems. If there's been infiltration, there should be discrepancies." As she worked, I studied the tactical display more carefully. The pattern of satellite failures was becoming clearer with the additional data from the backup systems. The attack hadn't been random. It had been surgical, designed to create specific blind spots while maintaining just enough coverage to guide incoming threats. "Aiden," Bella said, her voice carrying a note of urgency that made my stomach clench. "I'm finding anomalies in the backup systems too. Someone's been here." "That's impossible," Travis said, moving to look over her shoulder. "These systems are physically isolated. There's no way to access them remotely. Then someone accessed them locally? Bella replied, her fingers flying across her tablet as she pulled up security logs. Look at this. There are traces of unauthorized access dating back 6 months. Someone with high-level clearance has been in these systems. The implications hit me like a physical blow. If the backup systems had been compromised, then our last line of defense was already breached. We were operating blind, with no way to know what information was real and what was fabricated. Who has access to these systems? Cole asked, his voice carrying the deadly calm of a man who just realized the enemy was already inside the gates. Limited personnel, Travis said, but his voice was uncertain. Maybe a dozen people total, all with TS/SCI clearance. Give me the list, Cole ordered. As Travis pulled up the access logs, I heard the distinctive sound of heels on metal grating echoing through the control center with the precision of a countdown timer. I turned to see Dalia walking toward us, her contractor's badge clearly visible on her dark jacket. She moved with the confident stride of someone who belonged here, but there was something in her eyes, a mixture of guilt and desperate determination, that made my blood run cold. I need to tell you something, she said, her voice cutting through the electronic hum of the control center like a blade. About the satellite network. About what's really happening. Cole's hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm. A subtle gesture that spoke of years of training and the kind of paranoia that kept military installations secure. Dr. Dalia Chun, he said, his voice carefully neutral. You're not supposed to be in this section. I know, she said, stopping just outside arm's reach. But I need to tell you what I've done, what I helped them do. The room fell silent except for the steady hum of cooling systems and the soft electronic whine of overloaded circuits that sounded like the death rattle of dying machines. I could feel the tension ratcheting up like a coiled spring, everyone suddenly aware that we might be facing our saboteur. The air itself seemed to thicken with suspicion and barely contained violence. I used to work for the NSA, Dalia continued, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Cyber Warfare Division. 3 years ago, I was recruited for a black project, testing the security of military satellite networks. We were supposed to find vulnerabilities, plug holes, make the systems more secure. Supposed to, Cole repeated, his voice carrying the weight of terrible understanding. The project was legitimate at first, Dalia said, her words coming faster now, as if she needed to get them out before she lost her nerve. We found dozens of vulnerabilities, wrote reports, recommended fixes. But then the project was classified beyond my clearance level. I was told my work was being used to improve security, but I wasn't allowed to see the implementations. She pulled out a tablet, her fingers shaking as she accessed files that made my blood run cold. The data streams on her screen looked like digital cancer, spreading through network diagrams with the relentless efficiency of a perfectly designed weapon. 6 months ago, I realized what was really happening. The vulnerabilities we'd found weren't being fixed, they were being weaponized. Someone was using our research to create backdoors, to turn our own defensive systems into attack vectors. Bella moved closer to examine Dalia's tablet, her face pale in the green glow of the display. These are the same attack vectors I've been tracking, she said quietly. The infiltration patterns, the timing, the surgical precision. You helped them build this. I tried to stop it, Dalia said, her voice breaking. I went to my superiors, tried to raise concerns through proper channels. But every time I got close to the truth, I was reassigned, transferred, told to focus on other projects. It wasn't until I left the NSA and took this contractor position that I realized how deep this went. How deep? Cole asked, his voice carrying the tone of a man who was already calculating the worst-case scenario. Deep enough to turn our own satellite network into a weapon, Dalia replied. They've been using the military satellites to coordinate the attack, to create blind spots that allow their missiles to approach undetected. The attack isn't just about blinding us, it's about using our own systems to guide their weapons to target. The tactical display behind us chose that moment to flicker and change, showing new data that made my heart stop. Multiple contacts were now visible on the screen, approaching from the northeast in a formation that was unmistakably hostile. The contacts moved with the steady, inexorable precision of death itself, each one representing the annihilation of a major American city. Travis, Cole barked, confirm those contacts. Sir, I'm getting correlation from multiple ground stations now, Travis replied, his voice tight with urgency. 12 contacts, ballistic trajectory, estimated time to impact 47 minutes. 47 minutes. The number burned itself into my consciousness like a brand, searing through my thoughts with the intensity of white-hot metal. In less than an hour, nuclear weapons would begin impacting targets across the United States, and we were powerless to stop them because our own defensive systems had been turned against us. The irony was brutal. We were being destroyed by the very technology designed to protect us. Where are they targeting? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew the answer. Travis's fingers flew across his keyboard, pulling up trajectory analysis from the remaining functional systems. Multiple targets, sir. Washington, D.C., New York, Los Angeles, and Denver. Denver. The word hit me like a physical blow to the chest, driving the air from my lungs. My parents lived in Denver, along with 500,000 other people who had no idea what was coming. The city where I'd grown up, where I'd learned to love engineering and technology, was about to be reduced to radioactive ash. Everything I'd ever known, everyone I'd ever loved, was 47 minutes away from being erased from existence. We have to warn them, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We have to evacuate the cities. With what communication system? Cole asked grimly. The civilian networks are overloaded, and we don't have satellite coverage to reach emergency management agencies. Then we use what we have, I said, my voice growing stronger as the engineering part of my brain took over. Ham radio, emergency broadcast systems, anything that can reach the population. Aiden, Bella said quietly, even if we could warn them, there's no time for evacuation. Denver is a metropolitan area of 2.5 million people. You can't evacuate that many people in 47 minutes. The math was brutal and undeniable. Even if we could somehow reach everyone in the target cities, even if they all believed the warning and acted immediately, there simply wasn't enough time to move millions of people to safety. The highways would become death traps, packed with vehicles that would be incinerated where they sat. It was a logistics nightmare with no solution, a problem that couldn't be solved by engineering or determination. But we can stop it, Dalia said, her voice carrying a note of desperate hope. I still have access to some of the systems. If we can isolate the corrupted satellites, maybe we can restore missile defense capabilities. The ones you helped compromise? Cole asked, his voice carrying the edge of barely controlled anger. "Yes," Dalia replied, meeting his gaze directly. "The ones I helped compromise. I know the attack vectors, the backdoors, the weaknesses. I can help you shut them down." I looked at the tactical display, watching the contacts creep closer to their targets like digital harbingers of doom. The moral calculus was brutal but simple. We could try to restore our defensive capabilities and risk being manipulated by the same people who had created this disaster, or we could accept defeat and watch millions die. There was no middle ground, no compromise solution that would save everyone. "What do you need?" I asked Dalia. "Access to the primary satellite control systems," she replied. "The ones in the main communication center. I need to upload a countervirus, something that will shut down the corrupted systems and hopefully restore clean control." "The main center is compromised," Bella said. "If we go back there, we'll be walking into a trap." "Maybe," Dalia said, "but it's the only chance we have. The backup systems here don't have the processing power to handle the full satellite network. If we're going to restore missile defense, we need the main systems." Cole was studying the tactical display with the intensity of a man weighing the fate of nations. The contacts moved across the screen with mechanical precision, each one representing a nuclear weapon capable of erasing a city from existence. "Even if we restore the satellite network," he said finally, "we still have to deal with the fact that someone inside our own government planned this attack. They'll be expecting us to try to restore defenses." "Then we do it fast," I said. "We get in, upload the countervirus, and restore the network before they can stop us." "And if it's a trap?" Bella asked. "If they're waiting for us?" I looked at her, seeing my own fear reflected in her eyes. The truth was, we had no good options. We could stay here and watch the missile's impact, or we could try to restore our defenses and risk walking into an ambush. But doing nothing meant accepting the deaths of millions of people. "Then we spring the trap," I said. "But we do it on our terms." Cole nodded grimly. "Travis, maintain contact with the ground stations. Monitor the incoming contacts and update us on any changes. Bella, can you prepare a clean communication link to the main center?" "Already working on it," Bella replied, her fingers flying across her tablet. "I'm setting up a hardened connection that should be immune to the corrupted systems." As we prepared to return to the main communication center, I found myself thinking about the people in Denver who had no idea what was coming. My parents, my old friends, the millions of innocent people who were about to become casualties in a war they didn't even know was being fought. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders like a physical burden, each breath becoming more difficult as the full scope of the situation became clear. We were the only ones who knew the truth, the only ones who might be able to stop what was coming. If we failed, if we couldn't restore the missile defense systems in time, then the blood of millions would be on our hands. The weight of those lives pressed down on me like the mountain itself. "Dalia," I said as we prepared to leave the backup control center, "how do we know you're telling the truth? How do we know this isn't part of the plan?" She looked at me with eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world. "You don't," she said simply. "You have to trust me, just like I have to trust that you won't let them succeed." Trust. In a world where our own defensive systems had been turned against us, where the enemy had been inside our networks for months, trust was the one thing we couldn't afford. But it was also the only thing we had left. The irony wasn't lost on me. To save ourselves from betrayal, we had to risk being betrayed again. As we began the journey back to the main communication center, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into the final act of a play that had been written long before we realized we were even on stage. The mountain around us seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, and somewhere above us, approaching at 17,000 miles per hour, our own doom was closing in with the precision of a Swiss watch. 43 minutes and counting. The timer in my head ticked down with the relentless rhythm of a heartbeat, each second bringing us closer to either salvation or annihilation. The journey back to the main communication center took 8 minutes. 8 minutes that felt like a lifetime as the tactical display on my tablet showed the incoming contacts advancing with mechanical precision. Each update brought them closer to their targets, the digital markers creeping across the map like death incarnate. My hands trembled as I gripped the device, watching the countdown timer tick away our remaining time. 35 minutes and 12 seconds. The mountain corridors echoed with the hollow ring of our boots against concrete, punctuated by the distant wail of emergency alarms that had been sounding for the past hour. Emergency lighting cast everything in a hellish red glow, transforming familiar passages into something from a nightmare. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension, heavy with the metallic taste of fear and the ozone smell of overloaded electrical systems. The main communication center was a battlefield of sparking electronics and emergency lighting when we arrived. Half the monitoring stations were dark, their screens either shattered or displaying cascading error messages in angry red text. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burning circuits and the metallic tang of overheated systems pushed far beyond their design limits. "Jesus Christ," Cole muttered, surveying the devastation. "It looks like a war zone." The damage was worse than I'd imagined. Workstations that had been pristine hours earlier were now twisted metal and shattered glass, their components scattered across the floor like the remains of some electronic massacre. Sparks cascaded from severed cables, creating brief fountains of light that illuminated the destruction in stark, flickering detail. "The direct attack came through the main network," Dalia said, pulling up diagnostic data on her tablet. "When they triggered the final phase, it sent feedback pulses through the hard lines. They turned our own power systems into weapons." I moved to the central console, the one station that still seemed partially functional. The primary display was cracked but operational, showing a tactical overview that made my blood run cold. 12 red markers moved across the continental United States, each one representing a nuclear weapon with the power to erase a city from existence. The estimated impact times were staggered, creating a cascade of destruction that would unfold over the next 32 minutes. "Travis to command," came the voice from my radio, crackling with static and interference. "Sir, we're getting radar confirmation from multiple ground stations. 12 ballistic objects confirmed, strategic nuclear payloads. Impact sequence begins in 31 minutes. The words hit me like physical blows, each syllable carrying the weight of annihilation. Nuclear payloads. Not just missiles, not just explosives, actual thermonuclear weapons, each one capable of turning a major city into a crater of radioactive glass. The engineering part of my brain tried to calculate blast radii and thermal effects, but the human part of me recoiled from the numbers. "Can we reach missile defense?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Negative," Cole replied, his fingers flying across his communications console. "Without satellite coordination, our interceptor missiles are blind. We can't track the incoming warheads accurately enough to achieve intercept." Bella was already working at the damaged central console, Her tablet connected to the main systems through a jury-rigged interface that sparked occasionally with electrical discharge. "I'm trying to establish a link to the primary satellite control systems," she said, her voice tight with concentration. "But the main processors are corrupted. Every time I try to connect, I get feedback that threatens to fry my equipment." "That's the viral payload," Dalia said, moving to help her. "It's designed to corrupt any system that tries to interface with the compromised satellites. We need to upload the countervirus first, then attempt to restore clean communication." I watched the tactical display, my heart hammering against my ribs as the countdown timer showed 29 minutes remaining. The incoming weapons were spread across multiple trajectories, their paths calculated to maximize destruction and minimize our ability to respond. Washington, D.C., New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Denver. Each marker represented millions of lives that would be snuffed out in nuclear fire unless we could restore our defenses. "Connection established," Bella announced, her voice tight with concentration. "But the link is unstable, massive corruption in the primary satellite control systems. I can maintain this for maybe 8 minutes before the viral payload spreads to my equipment." 8 minutes. The number burned itself into my consciousness as I stared at Dalia, seeing my own desperation reflected in her eyes. "Is that enough time?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would determine whether millions lived or died. "It has to be," she replied, her fingers already flying across her tablet to initiate the upload sequence. "The countervirus will take 6 minutes to upload, then 90 seconds to verify the cleansing process. After that, we should be able to restore satellite control and guide our missile defense systems." "Should be." The uncertainty in her voice was a knife in my chest, but it was the only chance we had. I looked at the tactical display again, watching the red markers advance toward their targets. In 30 minutes, those markers would reach American cities and detonate with the force of small suns. Everything I'd ever known, everyone I'd ever loved, would be reduced to radioactive ash unless we could stop what was coming. "Do it," Cole ordered. "Upload the countervirus." Dalia's fingers flew across her tablet, initiating the upload sequence. The main display flickered and changed, showing data streams that flowed like digital rivers across the screen. The countervirus was a complex piece of code, designed to hunt down and eliminate the corrupted elements in the satellite network while preserving the core functionality. It was elegant in its simplicity, but terrifying in its necessity. "Upload initiated," Dalia announced. Estimated completion time, 6 minutes, 43 seconds. 6 minutes and 43 seconds. The timer began its countdown, each second feeling like an eternity as we watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. Meanwhile, the tactical display continued to show the incoming weapons advancing toward their targets. The gap between our salvation and our destruction measured in mere minutes. "Aiden," Bella said quietly, her voice carrying a note of concern that made my stomach clench. "I'm detecting unusual activity in the network. Something's fighting back against the countervirus." I moved to look over her shoulder, studying the data streams on her tablet. The network traffic was chaotic, with bursts of activity that suggested something was actively resisting our attempts to cleanse the system. It was like watching a digital battle being fought in real time, with our countervirus struggling against an enemy that seemed to adapt and evolve with each passing second. "They're not just going to let us fix this," I said, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. "They're monitoring the network, fighting back in real time. Then we fight back harder, Cole said grimly. What do you need? Before I could answer, the lights in the communication center flickered and died, plunging us into darkness broken only by the emergency lighting and the glow of our tablet screens. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the steady hum of backup power systems and the distant sound of ventilation fans struggling to maintain air circulation. They're trying to cut our power, Bella said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. But the backup systems should hold for another hour. We don't have an hour, I replied, checking the tactical display. We have 26 minutes before the first impacts. The upload progress bar showed 3 minutes and 17 seconds remaining. 3 minutes that felt like a lifetime as we stood in the semi-darkness, watching our last hope slowly transfer across compromised networks. The countervirus was fighting its way through layers of corruption, hunting down and eliminating the digital parasites that had turned our own defensive systems against us. Aiden, Dalia said suddenly, her voice carrying a note of alarm. I'm getting reports of activity at the other installations. Someone's trying to override our countervirus from multiple locations. The implications hit me immediately. The attack wasn't just about the satellite network. It was about ensuring that we couldn't respond even if we discovered the truth. They had people inside other installations, other facilities, all working to prevent us from restoring our defensive capabilities. How many locations? Cole asked. At least 4, Dalia replied, her fingers flying across her tablet as she tried to track the interference. Peterson Air Force Base, Vandenberg, Schriever, and... Here, someone inside Cheyenne Mountain is trying to stop us. The betrayal was complete. Not only had they corrupted our satellite network, but they had agents inside our most secure facilities, people with the access and authority to sabotage our attempts at defense. We were fighting a war on multiple fronts, with enemies both foreign and domestic. Travis, Cole barked into his radio. I need a security sweep of the backup control center. Check everyone's credentials, verify their identities, and detain anyone who doesn't belong. Copy that, sir, came the reply. But sir, we're getting reports of multiple intrusions throughout the facility. Security is spread thin. Multiple intrusions. The attack was coordinated not just in cyberspace, but in physical space as well. They were inside our walls, in our most secure facilities, working to ensure that even if we discovered their plan, we wouldn't be able to stop it. The mountain itself had been compromised, turned from a fortress into a trap. Upload at 60%, Bella announced. 2 minutes, 18 seconds remaining. 2 minutes and 18 seconds. The numbers burned themselves into my consciousness as I watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. Meanwhile, the tactical display showed the incoming weapons continuing their inexorable advance toward American cities. Each second that passed brought us closer to either salvation or annihilation. Aiden, Dalia said, her voice tight with concern. I'm losing the connection. Someone's actively trying to sever our link to the satellite network. I looked at her tablet, seeing the data streams becoming increasingly chaotic as something fought against our countervirus. The digital battle was intensifying, with our cleansing program struggling against corrupted code that seemed to adapt and evolve with each passing second. Can you maintain the connection? I asked. I'm trying, she replied, her fingers flying across her tablet. But they're using multiple attack vectors, hitting us from different angles. It's like fighting a hydra, Every time I block one attack, two more take its place. The upload progress bar showed 85% complete. 1 minute and 47 seconds remaining. We were so close to success, so close to restoring our ability to defend ourselves, but the enemy was throwing everything they had at us to prevent our success. Bella, I said, can you reroute through the backup satellite control systems? Already tried, she replied. They're corrupted too. The virus has spread through every system that connects to the satellite network. It's like a digital plague, infecting everything it touches. A digital plague. The metaphor was apt. The corruption was spreading through our networks like a disease, turning our own technology against us. Every system that tried to interface with the satellite network became infected, compromised, turned into another weapon in the enemy's arsenal. Upload at 95%, Bella announced. 43 seconds remaining. 43 seconds. The end was in sight, but those final seconds felt like hours as we watched the progress bar creep toward completion. The tactical display showed the incoming weapons less than 20 minutes from their targets, each marker representing a nuclear weapon with the power to erase a city from existence. "Sir," came Travis's voice over the radio, "we've got a problem. Security reports multiple hostiles inside the facility. They're moving toward the main communication center. Multiple hostiles. The enemy was inside our walls, moving toward our location with the precision of a military operation. They knew exactly where we were, exactly what we were trying to do, and they were coming to stop us. The trap was closing, and we had nowhere to run." "Upload complete," Bella announced. "Initiating verification sequence." The main display flickered and changed, showing new data streams as the countervirus began its work. The corrupted code was being hunted down and eliminated, the digital parasites that had turned our satellites against us being purged from the system. It was working slowly, but it was working. "Verification at 20%, Dalia said. "Estimated completion time, 90 seconds, 90 seconds. We needed 90 seconds to complete the cleansing process and restore our defensive capabilities." But the tactical display showed the incoming weapons less than 18 minutes from their targets, and hostile forces were advancing on our position. Every second counted now, every heartbeat bringing us closer to either triumph or catastrophe. "Cole," I said, "we need to buy time. Can you delay the hostiles?" "I'll try," he replied, drawing his sidearm and moving toward the entrance. "But if they have inside knowledge of the facility, they'll know every route, every hiding place." Inside knowledge. The words sent a chill down my spine as I realized the full scope of the betrayal. They didn't just have people inside our government, inside our military. They had people inside this very facility, people who knew every corridor, every system, every weakness. We were fighting an enemy that knew us better than we knew ourselves. "Verification at 50%, Bella announced. 60 seconds remaining. 60 seconds. 1 minute to complete the cleansing process, restore satellite control, and guide our missile defense systems to intercept the incoming weapons." But even as I watched the progress bar advance, I could hear the sound of footsteps echoing through the corridors outside, the steady rhythm of armed forces advancing on our position. "They're here," Cole said grimly, taking position at the entrance. Multiple contacts, moving with military precision. The sound of automatic weapons fire erupted from the corridor outside, the sharp crack of high-velocity rounds echoing through the communication center. Cole returned fire, his pistol barking in rapid succession as he tried to hold back the advancing forces. But it was clear that we were outnumbered and outgunned. Verification at 75%, Dalia announced. 30 seconds remaining. 30 seconds. Half a minute to complete the process and restore our ability to defend ourselves. But the gunfire outside was intensifying, and I could hear the sound of tactical teams moving to surround our position. We were trapped, with nowhere to run and no way to escape. "Aiden," Bella said, her voice steady despite the chaos around us. "When the verification completes, we'll need to manually guide the missile defense systems. The automated systems are too damaged to function properly." Manual guidance. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Even if we succeeded in cleansing the satellite network, we would still need to manually target and guide the interceptor missiles. It would require precision, timing, and skills I'd never had to use under combat conditions. "Can you do it?" I asked. "I'll have to," she replied. "We all will." The verification process crawled toward completion as the battle raged outside our position. Cole was holding his ground, but I could see the strain in his movements, the way his ammunition was running low. We had seconds left, maybe minutes, before the hostiles would breach our defenses and stop us from completing our mission. "Verification complete," Bella announced. "Satellite control restored. Initiating missile defense systems." The main display flickered and changed, showing a new tactical overview. The incoming weapons were still advancing toward their targets, but now we could see them clearly, track their trajectories, predict their impact points. More importantly, we could see our own interceptor missiles, ready to launch on our command. 12 interceptors available, I said, studying the display. 12 incoming warheads. We get one shot at each target. One shot. The margin for error was 0. If we missed even one interceptor, an American city would be wiped from the face of the earth. The weight of that responsibility settled on my shoulders like a physical burden, each breath becoming more difficult as the full scope of the situation became clear. "Initiating intercept sequence," Bella said, her fingers flying across her tablet. "Launching interceptors in 3, 2, 1. The tactical display erupted with new contacts as our interceptor missiles launched from sites across the country. Each missile was a precision-guided weapon, designed to hunt down and destroy incoming warheads with surgical accuracy. But they were also our last hope, our final chance to prevent nuclear annihilation. "Intercept window, 14 minutes, I announced, watching the converging trajectories on the display. "All interceptors are tracking their targets." 14 minutes. In 14 minutes, we would know whether our desperate gamble had succeeded or failed, whether the cities of America would survive the night or be reduced to radioactive ash. The weight of millions of lives hung in the balance, measured in seconds and missile trajectories. The gunfire outside suddenly stopped, replaced by an ominous silence that was somehow more terrifying than the sound of battle. Cole remained at his position, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his weapon tracked toward the entrance as he waited for the next assault. "They're regrouping," he said grimly. "This isn't over." No, it wasn't over. Even if our interceptors succeeded, even if we prevented the nuclear attack, we still had to deal with the traitors inside our own government, the people who had orchestrated this attack. The enemy was still out there, still dangerous, still capable of striking again. But for now, all we could do was watch the tactical display and pray that our interceptors would find their targets in time. The fate of America hung in the balance, measured in missile trajectories and the steady tick of a countdown timer that refused to slow down. 13 minutes and counting. The battle for our nation's survival was just beginning. The tactical display painted a digital ballet of death across the main screen. 12 interceptor missiles racing toward 12 incoming warheads. Each trajectory a thin line between salvation and annihilation. I stood transfixed, watching the convergence patterns as our last hope streaked through the upper atmosphere at 17,000 miles per hour, guided by satellite systems we'd barely managed to restore. First intercept in 11 minutes, 43 seconds, Bella announced, her fingers dancing across her tablet as she fine-tuned the guidance parameters. Interceptor 7 is tracking slightly off course, the warheads using evasive maneuvers. But even as she spoke, I could see new warning indicators cascading across her screen. Red alerts that shouldn't exist, system failures that made no sense. The restored satellite network was fighting against itself, critical processes failing in ways that suggested deliberate sabotage. Evasive maneuvers. The words sent ice through my veins as I realized the full sophistication of the attack. These weren't crude ballistic missiles following predictable arcs. They were advanced warheads capable of altering their flight paths to avoid interception. Every assumption we'd made about their capabilities had been wrong. "Can you compensate?" I asked, watching the red and blue dots on the screen dance their deadly waltz. "Working on it," she replied, her voice tight with concentration. "But the guidance systems are still corrupted. I'm having to manually calculate intercept vectors for each engagement." Manual calculations. The human mind racing against nuclear physics, trying to solve equations that normally required supercomputers. I watched my sister's hands fly across her tablet. Her training as an IT specialist suddenly transformed into the last line of defense against nuclear annihilation. The communication center's emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red, the damaged workstations throwing twisted shadows across the walls. The acrid smell of burning electronics mixed with the metallic tang of fierce sweat, creating an atmosphere thick enough to taste. Every breath felt labored, every heartbeat unnaturally loud in the relative silence that had followed the gunfire. "Cole," I called to our commander, who remained positioned at the entrance with his weapon trained on the corridor. "How long do we have?" "Unknown," he replied without turning. "They pulled back, but they're still out there. My guess is they're waiting for something, maybe additional reinforcements, maybe just for us to fail. Waiting for us to fail." The thought was like acid in my chest, but it made tactical sense. Why assault our position when time was on their side? In 10 minutes, either our interceptors would succeed and the immediate nuclear threat would be over, or they would fail and America's major cities would be reduced to radioactive craters. Either way, the damage would be done. "Aiden," Dalia said suddenly, her voice carrying a note of alarm that made my blood run cold. "I'm detecting new activity in the network. Someone's trying to upload a secondary virus, something specifically designed to target our interceptor guidance systems." The betrayal was complete and ongoing. Not content with the initial attack, they were now trying to sabotage our defensive response in real time. Every system we'd restored, every capability we'd fought to recover, was under assault from an enemy that seemed to anticipate our every move. "Can you block it?" I asked. "I'm trying," she replied, her fingers flying across her tablet. "But it's using the same access points as the countervirus. They're turning our own repair protocols against us." I moved to look over her shoulder, studying the data streams that flowed across her screen like digital rivers. The secondary virus was elegant in its malice, a piece of code designed to corrupt the guidance systems of our interceptor missiles at the moment of intercept. It would let us think we were succeeding right up until the moment of catastrophic failure. How long before it reaches the guidance systems? I asked. 8 minutes, she replied. Maybe less if it finds a direct pathway. 8 minutes. The timing was perfect from the enemy's perspective. The virus would corrupt our guidance systems just as our interceptors reached their targets, ensuring that even our last-ditch defense would fail. It was a level of planning and coordination that suggested months of preparation, maybe years. There has to be a way to stop it, I said. But even as I spoke, I could see the virus spreading through the network like a digital plague. Every system it touched became compromised, turned into another weapon in the enemy's arsenal. Not remotely, Dalia said. The virus is using encrypted pathways, bouncing through multiple servers. By the time I trace one connection, it's already established 10 others. What about locally? Bella asked, looking up from her guidance calculations. Could we isolate the guidance systems? Cut them off from the network? That would work, Dalia replied. But it would require physical access to the server room. Someone would have to go down there and manually sever the network connections. The server room. 3 levels down through corridors that were likely crawling with hostile forces. It was a suicide mission, but it might be our only chance to prevent the virus from corrupting our interceptor guidance systems. I'll go, I said, the words coming out before I'd fully thought them through. No, Bella said immediately. You're needed here to coordinate the intercepts. I'll go. I know the server room layout better than anyone. The server room layout. My sister had spent countless hours in that maze of cables and processors, debugging network issues and optimizing system performance. If anyone could navigate it quickly and efficiently, it would be her. But the thought of sending her into danger while I remained in relative safety made my stomach clench with guilt. It's too dangerous, I said. Those corridors are compromised. The hostiles could be anywhere, and in 6 minutes, those interceptors are going to miss their targets because of corrupted guidance systems, she replied. 12 nuclear warheads will impact American cities because we were too afraid to take a risk. 12 nuclear warheads. The number was a weight in my chest, each digit representing millions of lives that hung in the balance. She was right. The risk to one person, even someone I loved, was insignificant compared to the potential loss of entire cities. I'll go with her, Cole said, turning from his position at the entrance. Provide security, watch her back. No, I replied immediately. We need you here. If the hostiles breach this position, you're our only defense. Then who? He asked. We need someone who knows the facility layout, someone who can move fast and stay hidden. The answer came to me with sickening clarity. Dalia, I said. She's been inside the facility before. She knows the layout from her NSA work. And she's the one who understands the virus best. Dalia looked up from her tablet, her face pale in the emergency lighting. I can't, she said. I mean, I could try, but I'm not trained for this kind of thing. I'm an analyst, not a field operative. You're also the only one who can identify the exact systems that need to be isolated, I replied. Bella can guide you through the server room layout, but you're the one who knows which connections the virus is using. The weight of the decision settled on all of us like a physical presence. We were asking an analyst to perform a field operation, risking her life on the hope that she could move through hostile territory and complete a technical task under extreme pressure. But the alternative was the destruction of American cities and the deaths of millions of innocent people. "I'll do it," Dalia said finally, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "But I'll need real-time guidance from both of you, and I'll need to know exactly which systems to target." "You'll have it," Bella promised, already pulling up the server room schematics on her tablet. "I can guide you through the layout, and Aiden can coordinate the timing with the intercept sequence." The intercept sequence. I looked at the tactical display, watching our interceptors continue their race toward the incoming warheads. 6 minutes and 37 seconds until the first engagement. 6 minutes and 37 seconds to get Dalia to the server room, identify the corrupted systems, and sever the connections before the virus could sabotage our guidance systems. "The server room is 3 levels down," Bella said, handing Dalia a printed schematic. "Take the emergency stairs. They'll be less likely to have hostile forces. The main network junction is in Server Bay 7, rack position 15. Server Bay 7, rack position 15. The specificity of the location was reassuring, a concrete target in a situation that had become increasingly abstract. But it was also 3 levels down, through corridors that might be crawling with armed hostiles who were specifically trying to prevent us from completing our mission. "What about communications?" I asked. "How do we stay in contact?" "Emergency radio," Cole said, pulling a compact unit from his belt. "Military frequency encrypted, but the range is limited inside the mountain. You'll lose contact once you get too deep. Limited range, limited communications." Dalia would be on her own for the most critical part of the mission, navigating by memory and instinct through a facility that had become a battlefield. The margin for error was 0 if she took a wrong turn, if she encountered hostile forces, if she couldn't identify the right systems, millions of people would die. 5 minutes, 43 seconds, Bella announced. "The virus is spreading faster than expected. We need to move now." I looked at Dalia, seeing my own fear reflected in her eyes. She was terrified, but she was also determined, the guilt of her role in the initial attack driving her to risk everything to make it right. It was a kind of courage I'd never seen before, the willingness to face death not for glory or duty, but for redemption. "Go," I said. "We'll guide you as long as we can." She nodded, tucking the schematic into her pocket and checking the radio clipped to her belt. "If I don't make it back," she said, "tell my family I was trying to do the right thing." "You'll make it back," I replied, though the words felt hollow in my mouth. "Just stay low, move fast, and trust your instincts." She moved toward the entrance, pausing only to check the corridor for hostile forces. The emergency lighting cast her shadow long and twisted across the floor, a dark reminder of the danger she was walking into. Then she was gone, disappearing into the red-lit corridors of the mountain with only her courage and our desperate hope to guide her. "Dalia, radio check," I said into the communications unit. "Copy," came her voice, clear but tense. "Moving to the emergency stairs now. No contacts visible. No contacts visible." The words were reassuring, but I knew they could change in an instant. The hostile forces were out there somewhere, waiting and watching, ready to strike at the moment of maximum vulnerability. Every step Dalia took brought her closer to either success or catastrophe. For minutes, 55 seconds, Bella announced. First intercept window opening soon. I watched the tactical display, seeing the dance of dots that represented our last hope. The interceptors were closing on their targets, but without clean guidance systems, they would miss by miles. Everything depended on Dalia reaching the server room in time, identifying the right systems, and severing the connections before the virus could complete its work. Dalia, status report, I said into the radio. Stairwell clear, came her reply. Descending to level 3 now. Still no contacts. Level 3. She was halfway to her destination, moving through corridors that should have been familiar but had become alien territory. The emergency lighting would be casting everything in the same hellish red, transforming recognizable landmarks into something from a nightmare. 3 minutes, 20 seconds, Bella said. Interceptor 7 is still tracking off course. The virus is already affecting the guidance systems. The corruption was spreading faster than we'd anticipated, seeping through the network like digital poison. Even if Dalia reached the server room, she might already be too late to prevent the catastrophic failure of our defenses. Dalia, you need to move faster, I said into the radio. The virus is ahead of schedule. Copy, she replied, her voice tight with exertion. Level 3 accessed. Moving toward the server room now. The server room. She was almost there, almost at the point where our desperate gamble would succeed or fail. I found myself holding my breath, watching the tactical display while straining to hear any sound from the radio that might indicate her success or failure. 2 minutes, 47 seconds, Bella announced. Multiple guidance systems showing corruption. We're running out of time. The phrase echoed in my mind like a mantra, each repetition driving home the desperate nature of our situation. We had pushed our technology to its limits, coordinated a response that should have been impossible, and now everything depended on one person's ability to navigate a compromised facility and complete a technical task under extreme pressure. Dalia, report, I said into the radio. Static answered me. Pure, empty static that could mean anything: equipment failure, radio interference, or something much worse. The silence stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity as I waited for some sign that she was still alive, still moving, still fighting to complete her mission. Dalia, respond, I said again, my voice carrying a note of desperation that I couldn't suppress. More static. The communication was dead, severed by distance or interference or something more sinister. She was on her own now, navigating by instinct and memory through a facility that had become a maze of shadows and dangers. 1 minute, 58 seconds, Bella said. Guidance corruption at 30% and climbing. If she doesn't sever those connections in the next 60 seconds, we're going to lose multiple interceptors. 60 seconds. 1 minute for Dalia to reach the server room, identify the corrupted systems, and physically sever the network connections. 1 minute to complete a task that would normally take 5 minutes under optimal conditions. The margin for error had shrunk to nothing. I stared at the tactical display, watching the interceptors race toward their targets while the guidance systems slowly succumbed to digital corruption. Each second that passed brought us closer to either salvation or catastrophe, the fate of millions hanging in the balance like a sword suspended by a thread. 45 seconds, Bella announced. Corruption at 50%. We're losing guidance lock on multiple interceptors. Losing guidance lock. The interceptors were becoming blind, their sophisticated targeting systems corrupted by the virus that was spreading through our networks like a digital plague. Without guidance, they would miss their targets by miles, leaving the incoming warheads free to complete their deadly mission. 30 seconds, Bella said. Corruption at 70%. Aiden, we're about to lose everything. About to lose everything. The words hit me like physical blows, each syllable carrying the weight of nuclear annihilation. In 30 seconds, our last hope would be gone, and 12 nuclear warheads would impact American cities with the force of small suns. Everything we'd fought for, everything we'd sacrificed, would be meaningless. 20 seconds, Bella announced. Corruption at 85%. Multiple interceptors have lost lock completely. I closed my eyes, unable to watch the tactical display as our defenses crumbled. The virus had won, corrupting our guidance systems at the moment of maximum vulnerability. In seconds, the interceptors would pass their targets harmlessly, leaving the incoming warheads free to complete their journey of destruction. 10 seconds, Bella said. Corruption at 95%. We've lost. Wait, she said suddenly, her voice sharp with surprise. The corruption just stopped. It's not spreading anymore. I opened my eyes, looking at the tactical display with desperate hope. The guidance systems were still corrupted, but the virus had stopped spreading. The damage was extensive but not complete. Some of the interceptors still had partial guidance capability. Dalia did it, I said, the realization flooding through me like warm water. She severed the connections. The virus can't spread anymore. But is it enough? Bella asked, her fingers flying across her tablet as she tried to assess the damage. We've lost guidance lock on 8 interceptors. Only 4 still have partial capability. For interceptors, for chances to stop 12 incoming warheads. The odds were still impossibly bad, but they were better than 0. We still had a chance, still had hope, still had the possibility of preventing nuclear catastrophe. Can you restore guidance to the others? I asked. I'm trying, she replied. But the corruption is deep. It'll take time to clean the systems manually. Time we didn't have. The intercept window was measured in seconds now, each moment bringing us closer to either success or failure. But Dalia had given us a chance, risking her life to prevent the complete corruption of our defenses. The least we could do was make the most of that chance. Focus on the 4 clean interceptors, I said. Make sure they don't miss their targets. Copy that, Bella replied, her attention wholly focused on the guidance systems. Adjusting intercept vectors now. The tactical display showed the moment of truth approaching. 4 interceptors racing toward 4 incoming warheads, while 8 other nuclear weapons continued their journey toward American cities unimpeded. It wasn't the complete victory we'd hoped for, but it was better than total annihilation. Intercept in 5 seconds, Bella announced. 4, 3, 2, 1. The display erupted with new contacts as the interceptors engaged their targets. For flashes of light marked successful intercepts, for nuclear warheads destroyed in the upper atmosphere before they could reach their intended targets. But 8 others continued their deadly journey, their trajectories unchanged by our desperate defense. For intercepts confirmed, I said, my voice hollow with the weight of partial victory. 8 warheads still inbound. 8 warheads. 8 nuclear weapons that would impact American cities in less than 10 minutes. We had succeeded in preventing the complete destruction of our nation, but we had failed to prevent the deaths of millions of innocent people. The victory was real, but it tasted like ash in my mouth. "Dalia, respond," I said into the radio, desperate to know if she had survived her mission. "I'm here," came her voice, weak but alive. "Mission accomplished. The virus is contained, but I'm trapped in the server room. The hostiles have the corridors locked down. Trapped." She had risked everything to give us a chance at defense, and now she was paying the price. The server room was deep in the mountain, surrounded by corridors that were controlled by hostile forces. Even if she survived the immediate danger, rescue would be nearly impossible. "Hold position," I said. "We'll find a way to get you out." "No," she replied, her voice firm despite the fear I could hear beneath it. "Focus on those remaining warheads. Find a way to stop them." "I'll be fine." She wouldn't be fine. We all knew it, but there was nothing we could do. The immediate crisis took precedence over everything else, even the life of the woman who had made our partial victory possible. It was a cold calculation, but it was the only one that made sense. "Bella," I said, "is there any way to restore guidance to the remaining interceptors?" "I'm working on it," she replied, "but the corruption is too deep. It would take hours to clean the systems manually. Hours we didn't have. The remaining warheads would impact in less than 10 minutes, and there was no time to restore our defenses. We had prevented the complete destruction of our nation, but we had failed to prevent the deaths of millions of innocent people." The tactical display showed the grim reality of our situation. 8 nuclear warheads continuing their journey toward American cities, while our remaining interceptors drifted uselessly through the upper atmosphere. We had fought the good fight, but we had lost. The victory was partial, the defeat complete. "Aiden," Bella said quietly, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I looked at my sister, seeing the defeat in her eyes. We had done everything we could, risked everything we had, and it still wasn't enough. The enemy had planned too well, prepared too thoroughly, anticipated our every move. We had been outmaneuvered from the very beginning. "It's not your fault," I said, though the words felt hollow. "We did everything we could, but it wasn't enough," she replied. 8 cities are about to be destroyed, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. 8 cities, millions of lives. The weight of failure settled on my shoulders like a physical burden, each breath becoming more difficult as the reality of our situation sank in. We had failed in our most important mission, and the consequences would be measured in nuclear fire and radioactive ash. The tactical display continued to show the incoming warheads, their trajectories unchanged by our desperate efforts. In minutes, they would reach their targets and detonate with the force of small suns. Everything we'd fought for, everything we'd sacrificed, would be meaningless in the face of such destruction. But even as I watched the display, even as I accepted the reality of our failure, I couldn't give up. There had to be something else, some other option, some way to prevent the complete catastrophe that was bearing down on us. The fight wasn't over yet, and as long as there was breath in my body, I would continue to resist. "Bella," I said, "what about the remaining interceptors? Can we guide them manually?" "The guidance systems are too corrupted," she replied. "Even if I could establish a connection, the targeting would be completely unreliable, but not impossible." If we could establish even a partial connection, if we could guide the interceptors even roughly toward their targets, we might be able to achieve additional intercepts. The odds were slim, but they were better than nothing. Try it, I said. Even if the guidance is unreliable, even if we only get one more intercept, it's worth the attempt. She nodded, her fingers flying across her tablet as she tried to establish connections to the remaining interceptors. The process was slow and difficult, complicated by the corruption that had spread through our systems. But she was making progress, establishing partial links to interceptors that had been written off as lost. "I've got a connection to Interceptor 3, she announced. "Guidance is erratic, but I might be able to get it close to its target." Close to its target. Not a guaranteed intercept, but a chance. In a situation where we had no good options, a chance was better than nothing. I watched the tactical display, seeing the interceptor alter its trajectory slightly as Bella fought to guide it toward the incoming warhead. "Intercept probability?" I asked. 15%, she replied. "Maybe 20 if I can compensate for the guidance errors." 20%. The odds were terrible, but they were better than zero. And in a situation where millions of lives hung in the balance, even terrible odds were worth taking. I held my breath, watching the tactical display as the interceptor closed on its target. "Intercept in 30 seconds, Bella announced. "Trajectory is erratic, but it's still tracking." 30 seconds. Half a minute to see if our desperate gamble would pay off, if our partially corrupted systems could achieve one more miraculous intercept. The tension in the communication center was palpable, each of us holding our breath as we watched the dance of dots on the tactical display. 10 seconds, Bella said. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The display flashed with new light as the interceptor engaged its target. For a moment, I thought we had failed. The trajectory seemed wrong, the timing off. But then the incoming warhead disappeared from the display, destroyed in the upper atmosphere before it could reach its intended target. "Intercept confirmed," I said, my voice filled with wonder. "That's 5 down, 7 to go. 5 down, 7 to go." The odds were still terrible, but they were improving. Each successful intercept was a victory. Each saved city a triumph against overwhelming odds. We weren't defeated yet, and as long as there was a chance, we would continue to fight. "I'm establishing a connection to Interceptor 9, Bella announced. "Guidance is even more erratic, but I might be able to get it close. Not guaranteed, but possible." In a situation where the impossible had already happened multiple times, possible was good enough. I watched the tactical display, seeing another interceptor alter its trajectory as Bella worked her magic with corrupted systems and determination. The battle for America's survival was far from over. But for the first time since the crisis began, I felt something that might have been hope. We had achieved the impossible before, and we might be able to do it again. The fight continued, and as long as there was breath in our bodies, we would not surrender. 7 warheads remained, their paths unchanged by our efforts. But we had interceptors left, and we had the skill and determination to guide them. The odds were still against us, but they were better than they had been. And in a situation where everything hung in the balance, better was enough to keep fighting. The tactical display showed the continuing battle, our remaining interceptors racing toward their targets while corrupted guidance systems fought against our control. It was a battle of technology and will, of human determination against digital corruption. And for the first time since the crisis began, I believed we might actually win. The emergency lighting cast everything in blood-red shadows as I moved through the corridor toward the server room, my weapon drawn and ready. The silence was absolute. No alarms, no gunfire, no radio chatter. Just the distant hum of cooling systems and the sound of my own breathing, harsh and rapid in the confined space. In the tactical center behind me, Bella was fighting the battle of her life, guiding our remaining interceptors towards 7 incoming nuclear warheads using systems corrupted by enemy sabotage. We had achieved 5 intercepts, but 7 weapons of mass destruction were still bearing down on American cities. 3 minutes. In the tactical center above, Bella was fighting to guide our remaining interceptors towards 7 incoming nuclear warheads using corrupted guidance systems. We had achieved 5 intercepts, 5 cities saved from nuclear annihilation, but 7 weapons of mass destruction were still bearing down on American soil. The server room door stood slightly ajar, emergency lighting spilling through the gap like a wound in the darkness. I approached carefully, weapon raised, listening for any sound that might indicate hostile presence. The corridors leading here had been empty, but that didn't mean the server room itself was clear. "Dalia," I called softly as I pushed the door open. She was there, crouched behind a server rack with her tablet clutched against her chest. Her face was pale with exhaustion and fear, but she was alive. Relief flooded through me like warm water, followed immediately by the tactical awareness that our situation remained desperate. "The connections are severed," she said without preamble. "The virus can't spread anymore, but the damage is extensive. I count at least 60% corruption across the guidance networks." 60% corruption. The number was staggering, representing months of careful preparation by our enemies. They had anticipated our every move, planned for every contingency, and very nearly achieved complete victory. The fact that we had managed any intercepts at all was miraculous. "Can you restore the systems?" I asked, moving to her position behind the server rack. "Not from here," she replied. "I'd need direct access to the primary guidance computers, and they're back in the tactical center." "But Aiden, there's something else. I found evidence of a secondary attack." "Secondary attack." The word sent ice through my veins as I realized the enemy's plan was even more sophisticated than we had imagined. The satellite takedown and nuclear strike had been just the opening moves in a larger campaign designed to cripple America's defensive capabilities. "What kind of secondary attack?" I asked. "Ground-based infiltration," she said, pulling up data on her tablet. "While we were focused on the nuclear threat, they've been positioning assets near critical infrastructure. Power grids, communication hubs, military installations. They're preparing to follow up the nuclear strikes with conventional attacks designed to prevent any coordinated response." Ground-based infiltration. The enemy hadn't just planned to destroy our cities. They had planned to destroy our ability to respond to the destruction. It was a level of strategic thinking that suggested years of preparation, possibly decades of planning and positioning. "How many assets?" I asked. "Unknown," she replied, "but the data suggests they're already in position. As soon as the nuclear strikes are confirmed, they'll begin Phase 2 of the operation. Phase 2, the complete destruction of American civilization, achieved through a combination of nuclear strikes and conventional sabotage. Even if we manage to intercept the remaining warheads, the enemy would still have the capability to cripple our infrastructure and prevent any meaningful recovery. We need to get back to the tactical center, I said. Bella needs this information, and we need to coordinate our response. The corridors are compromised, Dalia replied. I've been monitoring radio traffic. They have at least a dozen operatives moving through the facility. They're hunting for us. The enemy forces weren't just trying to prevent our defensive response. They were actively seeking to eliminate the personnel responsible for coordinating it. We weren't just fighting for the survival of American cities. We were fighting for our own lives. Then we fight our way through, I said, checking my weapon. We can't coordinate a response from here, and every second we delay gives them more time to position their assets for Phase 2. She nodded, tucking her tablet into her vest and checking her own sidearm. Neither of us was trained for combat operations, but the situation had moved beyond our areas of expertise. We were improvising now, relying on determination and desperation to carry us through. Stay close, I said. If we encounter hostiles, let me handle the engagement. Your job is to get that data to Bella. The corridor outside the server room was empty, but I could hear movement in the distance. Footsteps, muffled voices, the sound of tactical teams moving through the facility. The enemy was close, and they were coordinating their search with military precision. We moved quickly but carefully, using the emergency lighting to avoid the darker sections where hostiles might be waiting in ambush. The red illumination turned everything into a hellscape of shadows and twisted metal, making it difficult to distinguish between threats and harmless equipment. Movement ahead, I whispered, raising my weapon as I spotted figures at the far end of the corridor. 3 hostiles moving in tactical formation with military-grade equipment. They hadn't seen us yet, but they were moving directly toward our position. In seconds, they would have visual contact and the advantage of superior numbers and equipment. Can we go around? Dalia asked. No, I replied. This is the only route back to the tactical center. The only route. We would have to go through them, which meant engaging 3 trained operatives with superior equipment and positioning. The odds were terrible, but they were the only odds we had. When I engage, move to the left-hand corridor, I said. Get to the tactical center and give Bella that data. Don't stop for anything. What about you? She asked. I'll catch up, I replied, though we both knew it was unlikely. 3 against 1 were bad odds, especially when the one was a satellite engineer with minimal combat training. The hostiles were getting closer, their tactical lights cutting through the red emergency illumination like swords. In moments, they would spot us and the engagement would begin. I took a deep breath, steadied my weapon, and prepared to fight for the survival of American civilization. Go, I said. The engagement was brief and brutal. My first shot took down the lead hostile, but the other 2 responded with professional competence, their return fire forcing me to take cover behind a damaged workstation. Dalia sprinted past them while they were focused on me, her footsteps echoing in the corridor as she raced toward the tactical center. The second hostile fell to my 3rd shot, but the 3rd operative was better positioned and better trained. His shots came close enough that I could feel the heat of their passage, and I knew it was only a matter of time before one found its mark. But time was what mattered. Each second I kept him engaged was another second for Dalia to reach the tactical center with the critical intelligence about the enemy's Phase 2 operation. Even if I didn't survive the engagement, she would be able to warn Bella about the impending infrastructure attacks. My fourth shot went wide, but my fifth found its target. The hostile dropped, his weapon clattering across the floor as he fell. I was alone in the corridor, surrounded by emergency lighting and the acrid smell of gunpowder. But I was alive, and Dalia was on her way to the tactical center with information that could save what remained of American civilization. I ran through the corridors, following the same path Dalia had taken toward the tactical center. The emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red, and I could hear more movement in the distance. Additional hostiles moving through the facility, hunting for survivors. The tactical center door was still sealed, its blast-resistant construction having protected our command post throughout the crisis. I entered the access code and stepped inside, finding Bella hunched over her guidance controls, while Cole maintained security at the entrance. "Dalia made it," Bella said without looking up. "She's briefing Cole on the secondary attack." "How many interceptors do we have left?" "3, I replied, studying the tactical display. "And 4 remaining warheads inbound." "For warheads." The odds were finally in our favor. More interceptors than targets, with the possibility of achieving complete interception if our corrupted guidance systems could be made to work. But the enemy's Phase 2 operation meant that even complete interception might not be enough to prevent the destruction of American civilization. "What's the status on the infrastructure attacks?" I asked. "Extensive," Cole replied. "Based on Dalia's intelligence, they have assets positioned near every major power grid and communication hub on the East Coast. They're waiting for confirmation of the nuclear strikes before beginning Phase 2. "Can we stop them?" I asked. "Not all of them," he replied. "But we can warn the affected facilities, get them to increase security and implement emergency protocols. It won't prevent all the attacks, but it might limit the damage." Limit the damage. It wasn't the complete victory we had hoped for, but it was better than total defeat. We had prevented the complete nuclear destruction of American cities, and we might be able to prevent the complete destruction of American infrastructure. The enemy would still achieve some of their objectives, but they wouldn't achieve all of them. "Bella," I said, "what's the intercept probability for the remaining warheads?" 60% for the first, 40% for the second, 20% for the third, and 10% for the fourth, she replied. "The guidance corruption is getting worse as the systems try to compensate for the damage." 60, 40, 20, 10. The probabilities were declining with each engagement, but they were still better than 0. And in a situation where the survival of American civilization hung in the balance, any chance was worth taking. "Begin the intercept sequence," I said. "All available interceptors, maximum effort." The tactical display showed our remaining interceptors altering their trajectories, their corrupted guidance systems struggling to maintain lock on the incoming warheads. It was a battle of technology and will, of human determination against digital corruption. "First intercept in 30 seconds, Bella announced. "Guidance is holding, but barely." I held my breath, watching the tactical display as our interceptor closed on its target. The trajectory was erratic, the timing uncertain, but it was still tracking. Everything we had fought for, everything we had sacrificed came down to this moment. "Intercept confirmed," Bella said. "That's 6 down, 3 to go. 6 down, 3 to go." We were winning, actually winning, against odds that had seemed impossible just hours ago. The enemy had planned for years, positioned assets across the globe, and corrupted our defensive systems with surgical precision. But they hadn't counted on human determination and the willingness to sacrifice everything for the survival of civilization. Second intercept in 45 seconds, Bella announced. Guidance is degrading, but I'm compensating manually. My sister was calculating intercept vectors in her head, using her training and intuition to guide nuclear interceptors toward their targets. It was impossible, but she was doing it anyway, because the alternative was the destruction of American cities. Intercept confirmed, she said. 7 down, 2 to go. 7 down, 2 to go. The odds were getting better with each success, but the guidance corruption was getting worse. The final 2 intercepts would be the most difficult, requiring perfect timing and flawless execution with systems that were barely functional. Third intercept in 1 minute, Bella announced. Guidance is almost completely corrupted. I'm flying blind here, flying blind, trying to guide a nuclear interceptor toward its target using instinct and estimation, with no reliable data and no margin for error. It was the definition of impossible, but we had achieved the impossible so many times already that it was starting to feel routine. You can do this, I said. You've done it 7 times already. This is different, she replied. The system is fighting me, trying to compensate for damage that doesn't exist. I'm having to fool it into thinking it's working properly, fooling the system, using the enemy's own corruption against them, turning their sabotage into a tool for our defense. It was elegant in its simplicity, and it was working. The interceptor was still tracking, still closing on its target. Intercept in 10 seconds, Bella announced. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The display flashed with new light as the interceptor engaged its target. For a moment, I thought we had failed. The trajectory seemed wrong, the timing off. But then the incoming warhead disappeared from the display, destroyed in the upper atmosphere before it could reach its intended target. 8 down, 1 to go, I said, my voice filled with wonder. 1 warhead remained. 1 nuclear weapon bearing down on an American city, its trajectory unchanged by our desperate efforts. But we had 1 interceptor left, and we had the skill and determination to guide it. The final engagement would determine whether we achieved complete victory or partial defeat. 4th intercept in 2 minutes, Bella announced. But Aiden, the guidance system is completely corrupted. I'm going to have to calculate everything manually. The final intercept would be achieved through pure human calculation, with no assistance from the sophisticated systems that had been designed to handle such tasks. It was the ultimate test of human capability against technological corruption. Can you do it? I asked. I don't know, she replied honestly. The variables are too complex, the timing too precise. But I'm going to try. She was going to try. In a situation where failure meant the nuclear destruction of an American city, she was going to attempt the impossible using nothing but her training and determination. It was either complete victory or devastating defeat, with no middle ground. Target is Washington, D.C., she announced. Population 4 million. If we miss this intercept, she didn't need to finish. Washington, D.C. was the heart of American government, the seat of democracy, the symbol of everything we had fought to protect. Its destruction would be a devastating blow to American morale and international standing. You won't miss, I said. You can't miss. Intercept in 60 seconds, she announced. I'm calculating trajectory now. I watched her work, her fingers flying across her tablet as she performed calculations that would normally require supercomputers. The mathematics were staggering: orbital mechanics, atmospheric drag, timing calculations precise to the millisecond. And she was doing it all in her head, under pressure that would have broken most people. 30 seconds, she announced. Trajectory calculated. Guidance locked. This is it. This was it. The final moment, the ultimate test. 8 nuclear warheads had been intercepted through a combination of skill, determination, and sheer luck. The 9th and final interception would determine whether our victory was complete or partial. 10 seconds, Bella announced. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The display exploded with light as the final interceptor engaged its target. The nuclear warhead disappeared from the display, destroyed in the upper atmosphere before it could reach Washington, D.C. Complete victory. Total success. 9 nuclear warheads intercepted. 0 American cities destroyed. All intercepts confirmed, I said, my voice breaking with emotion. 9 down, 0 to go. But even as we celebrated, I knew the fight wasn't over. The enemy's Phase 2 operation was still in motion, with assets positioned near critical infrastructure across the nation. We had prevented nuclear annihilation, but we hadn't prevented all forms of attack. Cole, I said, what's the status on the infrastructure warnings? Transmitted to all affected facilities, he replied. They're implementing emergency protocols now. Some attacks will still succeed, but the damage will be limited. Limited damage. Not the complete victory we had hoped for, but far better than the total defeat we had faced. The enemy would achieve some of their objectives, but they wouldn't achieve their primary goal of destroying American civilization. Dalia, I said, what's your assessment of the enemy's remaining capabilities? Significantly degraded, she replied. The nuclear strike was their primary weapon, and we've neutralized it completely. Their ground-based assets are limited in scope and capability. They can cause damage, but they can't achieve their strategic objectives. Strategic objectives. The complete destruction of American civilization, achieved through nuclear strikes followed by infrastructure attacks. We had prevented the nuclear strikes and limited the infrastructure attacks. The enemy had failed in their primary mission. What about their satellite attack capability? I asked. Can they repeat what they did today? Unlikely, she replied. The attack required years of preparation and positioning. They won't be able to achieve this level of coordination again anytime soon. Years of preparation. The enemy had planned this attack for years, possibly decades, positioning assets and infiltrating systems with meticulous care. But they had failed, defeated by a combination of human determination and sheer luck. So what's next? I asked. Recovery, Cole replied. We need to restore the satellite network, coordinate with other facilities, and begin the process of rebuilding what was damaged. It's going to take months, maybe years, but we'll get there. Recovery. The long, slow process of rebuilding what had been damaged and strengthening what had been weakened. It wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. We had survived the ultimate test, and we would survive the recovery as well. And the enemy? I asked. Neutralized, Cole replied. Their primary assets are blown, their coordination is broken, and their strategic objectives are unachievable. They'll try again someday, but it won't be soon. Neutralized. The enemy had thrown everything they had at us, and we had turned it back. They had planned for years, prepared for decades, and achieved nothing. American civilization would survive stronger and more prepared than before. The tactical display showed clear skies, no incoming missiles, no hostile aircraft, no immediate threats. For the first time in hours, America was safe. The crisis was over and we had won, but the victory came at a cost. The satellite network was severely damaged, communication systems were compromised, and infrastructure across the nation had been targeted by enemy assets. The recovery would be long and difficult, requiring resources and determination that would test our national resolve. "What about the hostiles in the facility?" I asked. "Contained," Cole replied. "Security teams are sweeping the mountain now. Most of them were eliminated during the fighting, and the rest are cut off from support. They're no longer a threat. No longer a threat. The enemy forces that had infiltrated our most secure facility had been defeated. Their mission failed, their objectives unachievable. We had defended our command post against overwhelming odds and emerged victorious." "Casualty report?" I asked. "Minimal," Cole replied. "We lost 3 security personnel during the initial breach, but everyone else is accounted for. Dalia took some minor injuries during her mission to the server room, but she's fine. Minimal casualties. In a crisis that could have claimed millions of lives, we had lost only 3 people. It was a testament to the skill and dedication of the personnel who had fought to defend America against nuclear attack." "What about the cities that were targeted?" I asked. "All safe," Bella replied. "Washington, D.C., New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, Philadelphia, Phoenix, San Antonio, and San Diego. 9 cities, 47 million people. All safe, 47 million people." The number was staggering, representing the scope of the catastrophe we had prevented. 47 million Americans who would go home to their families tonight, who would wake up tomorrow morning, who would continue their lives because we had succeeded in our mission. "And the infrastructure attacks?" I asked. "Limited success," Cole replied. "They managed to damage 3 power grids and 2 communication hubs, but the affected facilities were prepared. Service will be restored within hours, not days." Limited success. The enemy had achieved some of their secondary objectives, but they had failed in their primary mission. America would recover from the infrastructure damage, but it would not have recovered from nuclear annihilation. "So we won," I said, the reality of our victory finally sinking in. "We won," Bella confirmed. "Complete victory. Total success. America is safe. America is safe." The words echoed in my mind like a mantra, each repetition reinforcing the reality of our achievement. We had faced the ultimate test and emerged victorious. The enemy had thrown everything they had at us, and we had turned it back. The tactical display showed the aftermath of our victory. Debris fields where nuclear warheads had been destroyed, satellite trajectories slowly being restored, communication networks gradually coming back online. It was the beginning of recovery, the first step in the long process of rebuilding what had been damaged. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we go home," Cole replied. "We've done our job and we've done it well. The cleanup will take months, but the crisis is over. America will survive, and it will be stronger for having survived. Stronger for having survived." The enemy had tested our defenses and found them adequate. They had challenged our resolve and found it unbreakable. They had tried to destroy our civilization and succeeded only in proving its resilience. And the enemy? I asked. Defeated, Cole replied. Their assets are blown, their coordination is broken, and their strategic objectives are unachievable. They'll try again someday, but when they do, we'll be ready. The ultimate lesson of the crisis was the importance of preparation, of maintaining defensive capabilities even in peacetime, of never assuming that the enemy would remain dormant forever. We had been tested and we had passed the test. The tactical display showed clear skies and safe cities, the simple beauty of a crisis resolved and a mission accomplished. We had prevented nuclear annihilation through a combination of skill, determination, and courage. America was safe and it would remain safe. Bella, I said, you saved the world today. We all did, she replied. Every person in this room, every person who fought to defend America today. We did it together. The crisis had required the efforts of engineers and soldiers, analysts and commanders, each playing their part in the ultimate victory. No single person could have achieved what we had accomplished together. Cole, I said, what's our next assignment? Recovery, he replied. Rebuilding what was damaged, strengthening what was weakened, preparing for the next threat. It's not glamorous work, but it's necessary work. The unglamorous but essential task of maintaining civilization, of preparing for threats that might never come, of standing ready to defend America against any enemy who might challenge our way of life. And Dalia? I asked. Redemption, she replied. I helped cause this crisis, and I helped resolve it. Now I need to help prevent it from happening again. Redemption, the long process of making amends for past mistakes, of using experience and knowledge to prevent future crises. It was a worthy goal, and one that would serve America well. The tactical display showed the continuing recovery, satellite networks slowly being restored, communication systems gradually coming back online, infrastructure repairs beginning across the nation. It was the visible sign of American resilience, the proof that we could survive any challenge and emerge stronger. What about the families of the personnel who died? I asked. Honored, Cole replied. They gave their lives defending America, and their sacrifice will not be forgotten. Their families will be cared for, their memory preserved. Honored. The 3 security personnel who had died during the initial breach had made the ultimate sacrifice, giving their lives so that others might live. Their names would be remembered, their sacrifice honored, their families supported. And the future? I asked. Bright, Bella replied. We've proven that America can survive any challenge, overcome any threat, defeat any enemy. The future is bright because we've shown that freedom and democracy can never be conquered. The future is bright. Despite the crisis, despite the threat, despite the cost, America had survived and emerged stronger. The enemy had tested our defenses and found them adequate. They had challenged our resolve and found it unbreakable. The tactical display showed the final image of our victory. Clear skies, safe cities, and a nation that had survived the ultimate test. We had prevented nuclear annihilation, limited infrastructure damage, and defeated an enemy that had planned for years to destroy American civilization. America was safe. The crisis was over, and we had won. The hard-won success was complete. 9 nuclear warheads intercepted, minimal casualties, limited infrastructure damage, and total victory over an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. The cost had been high, but the victory was complete. America would recover. America would rebuild. America would be stronger than before, and America would be ready for whatever came next.